Deathworlder next door. Chapter 1. Selari tugged her cardigan tighter around her shoulders as she made her way down the dimly lit corridor. The hum of pipes and the faint tang of recycled air clung to the building, familiar in its own way. At the end of the hall, the laundry room door slid open with a tired hiss. Warmth spilled out, carrying with it the mingled scent of detergent, fabric softener, and faint ozone from the ancient dryers. Inside, the rhythmic whomp-whomp of machines filled the air. Rows of battered dryers lined the walls, their lights blinking in uneven patterns. Near the far corner stood Rin, her forearms working in effortless synchrony as she folded a mountain of freshly dried clothes. Her grey skin gleamed faintly under the fluorescence, and her upper set of hands flicked a sheet, while the lower pair smoothed the shirt flat with practiced ease. Selari felt herself relax, just a little. Rin was a familiar face, a Zerani, born on a low-gravity moon where 4 arms were nature's solution to every task. Selari had first met her in the building's communal lounge months ago, when Kale had tripped over his own shoes and spilled a drink all over the floor. Rin had laughed, not unkindly, and helped mop it up with 2 arms while balancing her own twins with the other pair. From there, small talk had grown into shared meals, favors, and friendship. "Long day?" Selari asked as she set her basket down, her voice carrying more weariness than she intended. "Long enough," Rin replied without looking up, her lower hands still working the laundry with mechanical grace. "But I survived, so I'd call that a win." Selari smiled faintly, feeding her own clothes into a dryer and tapping the controls. "Same. Paperwork, meetings, more paperwork. Thought I'd at least have fresh laundry waiting when I got home." "Practical as always," Rin said, stretching her upper arms until her joints cracked audibly. Her red-clear eyes flicked toward Selari, a conspiratorial gleam there. "Enjoy the calm while you can. You never know who might move in upstairs next." Selari arched an eyebrow. "Oh." Rin hesitated, all 4 hands pausing mid-fold. She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice even though the only other sound in the room was the steady hum of dryers. "Someone new. I only caught a glimpse when the movers came," but her voice dropped further. "I swear it looked like a human." Selari's fingers went stiff on the laundry she was folding, her olive green skin prickling. She forced a small laugh. Impossible. The city would never let a Deathworlder live here. Not in 100 years. Rin gave her a long, skeptical look. "Don't forget the treaties. Freedom of movement. Humans have every right now." The dryers continued to churn behind them, the sound suddenly too loud. Selari shivered despite the heat in the room. "I hope you're wrong." "Me too," Rin muttered, shoving another shirt into her basket. "Just thinking about it makes my stomach twist." Selari bent to remove her own clothes from the machine, folding them methodically, basket nearly full. She tried to focus on the warm fabric in her hands, the clean scent of detergent, the normalcy of the moment. "Finally caught up?" Selari asked, sliding her basket onto the folding counter. She was nearly finished, her clothes stacked neatly, while Rin still sprawled in chaotic piles. Rin made a noise between a laugh and a sigh. "Laundry waits until it buries me alive, then I remember it exists." Selari chuckled, shaking her head as she worked through the last few shirts. She could be done within minutes. Take Rin's basket back to her, share the walk, and call the evening settled. That was when the door at the far end of the hall hissed open. Selari glanced up and froze. A figure stepped through, tall enough that for a moment it seemed the doorway itself strained to contain him. Human. There was no mistaking it. He moved with an ease that unsettled her shoulders, rolling fluidly, stride unhurried yet carrying a weight of strength in every step. His skin was pale, touched with a faint flush of exertion, and his cropped dark hair only emphasized the angular planes of his face. He carried himself without effort, a canvas bag slung over one shoulder, his expression unreadable save for the faintest quirk of amusement tugging at his mouth. When his gaze brushed across them, Selari's heart hammered. "Evening," he said, voice deep but spare, the syllables clipped in that human way, laconic, efficient, as if words were rationed. Neither she nor Rin answered. Their bodies had gone rigid, instinct recoiling even as they stayed rooted in place. The human did not linger. He passed them smoothly, unbothered, and stopped at a dryer farther down the row. He opened it, the door groaning under his grip, and began drawing out his clothes. What struck Selari most was the precision. Each article was folded with exacting care, edges sharp, sacks tidy. The movements were practiced, habitual, drilled into him like ritual. The whole process took only minutes, and yet the silence stretched unbearably, every rustle of fabric loud in her ears. Then he hefted the neat stack back into his bag, turned, and glanced their way. Once more, a flicker of white as his mouth curved in a smile, canines catching the light. Selari's stomach tightened. And then he was gone, footsteps receding as the door closed softly behind him. Only in the ringing quiet that followed did Selari notice Rin trembling, all four hands clenched tight around the fabric she'd been folding. Her friend's grey skin had gone ashen, her red's clear eyes wide with shock. A heartbeat later, Rin crumpled, and Selari lunged to catch her. Selari staggered under Rin's sudden weight, the laundry basket clattering against her hip as she caught her friend with both arms. Rin's four limbs twitched weakly, her head lolling against Selari's shoulder. "Rin, stay with me," Selari whispered, her voice trembling more than she meant it to. She could still feel the charged air left behind by the humans passing, as though his presence had soaked into the walls and floor. Every sound seemed magnified, the distant hum of dryers, the faint buzz of a light panel overhead, her own pulse roaring in her ears. Rin groaned softly, her red's clear eyes fluttering, but unfocused. Her upper hands clutched weakly at Selari's sleeve while the lower pair hung limp. Selari adjusted her grip, looping one of Rin's arms over her shoulder and steadying her waist with the "Avo, come on," she urged. "Let's get you home." The walk down the corridor felt twice as long as usual. The walls, once merely dull grey, now seemed to lean in, every shadow a lurking shape. Selari's olive-green skin prickled with unease as her ears strained for any hint of returning footsteps, but the hall remained silent. Her basket slid awkwardly against her hip until she shifted, balancing it atop Rin's half-folded laundry. The mingled scents of detergent and fabric softener clung to the clothes, comforting in their ordinariness, yet now strange like a shield too fragile to protect against what had just brushed past them. Rin mumbled something incoherent, her breath warm against Selari's neck. Selari squeezed her gently. Almost there. Just a few more steps. Finally they reached Rin's door. The panel chimed faintly as Selari tapped the entry code for her, fingers fumbling. The lock gave way with a click, and the door slid aside to reveal the small, cluttered apartment within. The familiar smells of spiced tea leaves and baked grain rushed out to meet them. Toys were scattered in the corner her twins, and a colorful woven blanket lay draped over the couch, one Selari herself had admired on market day weeks ago. The sight should have been comforting, but right now it only made Selari ache. This was safety, a haven, and yet only a thin wall away lurked a predator. She guided Rin carefully to the couch, easing her down until the older woman's forearms settled heavily against the cushions. Rin's breathing steadied, though her skin still looked too pale, her chest rising and falling too quickly. Selari set both baskets on the table, straightening the half-folded stacks as her hands moved almost automatically. She needed the task, the normalcy to keep her own panic at bay. The soft smell of fresh laundry filled the room as she stacked the last shirt. "Here you go," she murmured, brushing her hands against her cardigan. "Just rest. I'll check on you later." Rin's eyes cracked open, glassy but grateful. She managed a faint nod before sinking deeper into the couch, the blanket sliding over her shoulders. Selari lingered a heartbeat longer, torn between staying and running home to her children. At last she slipped back into the hall, the door whispering shut behind her. The corridor stretched before her, dim and quiet, but her imagination painted it full of shadows. Somewhere nearby, separated by nothing more than steel and plaster, lived the human, a Deathworlder. Selari adjusted the basket against her hip, her hands shaking despite herself, and forced her feet toward the elevator. Selari's steps echoed hollowly in the corridor as she made her way toward the elevator, laundry basket tucked tight against her hip. The hall felt emptier than usual, though every shadow seemed alive, every flicker of the light strips overhead making her pulse spike. She pressed the call button with a trembling finger and tapped her foot impatiently until the door slid open with a low, metallic groan. The car was empty. Relief swept through her chest in a rush so strong it nearly made her knees weak. She stepped inside quickly and jabbed the button for her floor 140. The doors began to slide shut, blessedly slow, as if sealing her into a cocoon of safety. She let out a shaky breath, convincing herself she was alone now. He's still back in the laundry room. Walk on another way. There's no reason he would follow me. For the briefest moment, she pictured the elevator carrying her upward, safe, the doors never opening again until she was home. Her pulse began to settle, then a hand thrust through the narrowing gap. Large, pale, with blunt, squared fingers tipped by nails that caught the light. The sensors tripped, and the doors hissed open again. Selari's breath caught, her throat seizing. He stepped in. The human. The one from the laundry room. His sheer size filled the confined space, forcing her to shrink back against the far wall without realizing she'd moved. His canvas bag shifted against one broad shoulder with a quiet rustle in the other hand. He held a cup, some dark drink steaming faintly. Selari's throat tightened. Every detail of him seemed magnified in the small elevator, the breadth of his shoulders, the dense cords of muscle shaping his arms beneath his plain shirt, the faint scrape of his boots against the floor. The recycled air carried a trace of his scent, warm and unfamiliar, layered beneath the sharper tang of detergent from his freshly folded laundry. He glanced at her once, calm, unreadable, his dark eyes steady but not unkind. "What floor?" he asked, voice even, casual, yet somehow it filled the little space. Selari swallowed, her voice thin and shaky when it came. 140. He pressed the button, unnecessary, since it was already lit, and leaned back slightly, balancing the weight of his laundry bag as if it were nothing. Silence settled between them, broken only by the hum of the lift and the occasional slosh of liquid in his cup when the car shifted. Selari stood rigid, every nerve buzzing. The seconds dragged, each one a lifetime. She kept her eyes fixed on the glowing floor indicator, willing it to climb faster. The elevator felt unbearably small, the human's presence making the walls press inward. At last, the number flicked to 140. The doors parted with a soft chime. He stepped out first, stride smooth, deliberate, his shadow stretching into the hallway ahead of him. Selari stayed rooted until he had gone several paces, his form retreating down the corridor toward the apartments. Only then did she move, clutching her basket so tightly her fingers ached, darting out of the elevator and down the hall toward her apartment. Once she arrived at her apartment's front door, she fumbled with the key panel. The laundry basket clutched awkwardly against her hip. The corridor outside her unit felt impossibly long, every step dragging, as though the recycled air had thickened into something heavier, pressing against her skin. Her pulse hadn't slowed since the elevator, since his voice, his presence, the hand that had forced the doors open. Every instinct screamed at her to retreat somewhere familiar, somewhere she could put walls between herself and that terrifying calmness. The door hissed shut behind her, sealing her in with the softer air of her own apartment, warmer, tinged with the faint sweetness of simmering cusack and herbs, mingled with the comforting hum of the air recycler. "Mama!" Two figures appeared from the living room, their footsteps less hurried now that they were older, but still eager. Lyra leaned against the doorway first, long hair streaked with violet dye catching the light. Her sharp eyes flicked from the basket to her mother's tense face, suspicion curling in her tone. "You're late." Again. Cale followed behind, slate clutched under, one arm, his wiry frame already showing the first hints of an adolescent growth spurt. "What happened?" he asked, curiosity unfiltered, voice open and guileless. Selari forced a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Nothing. Just helping Rin with her laundry," she said evenly, tucking the truth beneath the words. Lyra crossed her arms, skeptical, but didn't push. Cale edged closer instead, plucking at the basket. "Smells nice," he said, grinning. "Like the dryers downstairs." "Did you get the good machine this time?" Selari crouched slightly, brushing a loose strand of hair from Lyra's face, then squeezing Cale's shoulder with her free hand. Their presence grounded her older. Now, but still her children, still her anchor. "You two settle in. Dinner's nearly ready," she said, ushering them toward the couch. The simmer pot gurgled faintly in the kitchen, filling the apartment with warmth and spice. Selari turned to it like a lifeline, though her thoughts kept drifting to the tall figure in the corridor, the precise hands, the clipped voice. "Lyra," and Cale whispered to each other on the couch, Lyra rolling her eyes dramatically, while Cale countered with mock-serious questions about whether their mother was teaching the Guzak table manners. Selari's lips twitched despite herself, a laugh escaping before she could stop it. The shadows outside her door felt a little less oppressive for it. Selari moved into the kitchen, setting out a pan on the stovetop. Cooking was one of the few routines that kept her household steady. She pulled ingredients from the cupboard, working with practiced motions. She muttered under her breath, words not meant for anyone but herself. From the hallway, Cale's voice carried first, light and eager. "Mom's talking to the pan again." Lyra rolled her eyes, but smirked despite herself. "Better than talking to the new neighbor. Trust me." The two of them exchanged a glance, one amused, one wary, while Selari pretended she hadn't heard a thing. The sharp chime of the front doorbell made Selari start, a metallic jolt that made her drop her hands to her sides. Her pulse spiked, her thoughts scattering. Who could that be? She wondered, the mundane rhythm of the evening shattering in an instant. "Mama!" Lyra's small voice broke through the momentary silence. Cale's wide eyes followed, curious but trusting, both children now at her side in the hallway. I'll get it," Selari said, forcing her voice steady. She moved toward the door, the apartment suddenly feeling smaller, walls pressing in as though aware of what she feared might be waiting beyond. Her fingers brushed the control panel, sliding the door open, and there he was. The human. The figure from the laundry room. He filled the doorway with a presence that seemed almost too large for the thin metal frame, 6'2" of dense, precise muscle. His cropped dark hair accentuated angular planes of pale skin, and his dark eyes, steady and unreadable, fixed on her. "Evening," he said, voice calm, clipped, effortless. Just a greeting, and yet it reverberated in her chest as if carrying weight she wasn't ready to bear. Selari froze. The children peeked from behind her, innocently curious, their gazes bouncing between her tense frame and the imposing figure in the doorway. Lyra whispered. Monit's a human, and Cale tilted his head, eyes bright with unafraid fascination. "I'm Mason Pitts," he continued, laconic, and I hurried. "Just moved in. Thought I'd introduce myself." Selari's words caught in her throat. Only a quiet, nearly instinctive whisper escaped. "Nice to meet you too." "Have a good evening," he added, then gave a faint nod, a ghost of a smile flickering across his lips. For a moment, it was almost ephemeral, like a shadow that might vanish if looked at too closely. Then he turned, his broad shadow stretching along the corridor as he moved toward his apartment, each step measured, deliberate, and unsettlingly calm. Selari stood rooted, her chest tightening, until the soft click of his door shutting signaled the moment's end. Slowly, she slid her own door closed, leaning against it as if the motion could absorb the shock pressing against her chest. A shiver crawled along her spine, her olive-green skin prickling with lingering adrenaline, a warmth settling uneasily in her stomach at the realization that the stranger was just gone. She moved toward the stove, each step tentative, the warmth of the kitchen acting like a fragile shield against the chill that had settled in her bones. The pan hissed as oil heated, the faint tang of metal mingling with the rich aroma of the gusac she added carefully. Each stir, each flip of the sizzling pieces, was a small, grounding ritual, yet her thoughts kept drifting back to the shadow that had filled her doorway. The tall, unyielding figure, the deep, measured evening that had echoed in her ears and lingered there uninvited. "It's just a neighbor. Just a normal neighbor. Nothing to worry about," she muttered under her breath, her words tripping over each other as they spilled out in a quiet, nervous stream, barely audible over the soft crackle of the pan. From the table, Lyra and Cale exchanged a glance. The girl's lips twitched with suppressed laughter. "Mom's talking to the gusac again," she whispered, nudging her brother gently. Cale frowned, brow scrunching in mock seriousness before he grinned. "Maybe. She's teaching it manners," he said, voice low and conspiratorial, as if sharing a secret with the sizzling pan, the warmth of the kitchen somehow reassuring him despite the shadow of tension that lingered in the apartment. Selari let a small laugh escape despite herself, the tension in her chest loosening just enough for warmth to return. She shook her head, muttering more quietly, yes, just a neighbor, everything's fine, totally fine." The children giggled softly, returning to their drawing and small toys, their innocence unbroken, their world still bright and uncomplicated. The faint hiss and pop of the frying gusac punctuated the quiet, a rhythm that made the apartment feel alive and ordinary again, even with the shadow of the Deathworlder looming just beyond a thin wall. Selari exhaled deeply, shoulders sagging in relief, eyes flicking once more toward the hallway. Outside, somewhere beyond her apartment door, he existed, silent and efficient. Inside, her tiny sanctuary of smells, warmth, and laughter held firm, fragile but persistent. For now, that was enough. And if the gusac learned manners tonight, well, that would be an unexpected bonus.